Hey everyone, welcome back to Flow State Reactions. I am Miss Starry and I'm here yet again to react to The Lord of the Rings. And this is the appendices for the Two Towers. Yes, thank you for joining me behind the scenes yet again. This time we are on Big-Atures, so I'm just really excited to go ahead and get into this one. You know, I just recently finished editing The Taming of Smeagol for YouTube, and part 1 and part 2, and I'm telling you, that video just changed my life. It just really rocked my inner world in a way that, you know, I just was not expecting. Like, I knew I would enjoy the Smeagol video, but for whatever reason it just like blew my expectations out of the water. So you know, this journey has just been so magical for me, and I just wanted to extend my thanks yet again to those of you who encouraged me to watch them, because, you know, how do you don't even know that it is such a masterpiece in itself. Someone left a comment just recently that said, oh my goodness, I didn't even know these existed. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, there are people who don't even know that the appendices to these movies even exist, because we're in such, we just kind of dismiss the idea of behind the scenes. But anyway, I just hope everybody gets the opportunity to watch them. If you've never seen them before, then you can just start at the beginning of this playlist and just watch them for the first time with me. And I'm telling you, it's going to take you on a magical journey, okay? All right, you guys, without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get into this video. 1, 2, 3, let's flow. Here we go, Big-Atures.
I think to be a good modeler, you have to be a born storyteller. If you know the story you're telling, if you know how old a building is, if you know what its history is and who's lived in it, who lives in it now, then there's many, many things you can do to explain that visually.
Okay. If you think about Helm's Deep as a case in point, it's a great example of not only a beautiful piece of design by Alan Lee, but also his incredible ability to put a lineage into a series of architectural structures.
Helm's Deep was actually the first thing I started work on, and it was obviously going to be a major part of the second film, and we wanted to get the design locked down so that Richard could build a miniature. The 35th scale miniature of Helm's Deep was really one of the very first things that we ever built for Lord of the Rings. It was back in the days that Miramax were financing the film, and I'd occasionally take a video camera around and do a little presentation for Harvey and Bob Weinstein. So here we are in Helm's Deep.
Look at this.
It will be used for the animatics, but it will also be used for the movie too. We'll be filming wide shots. Now, as you can see, the model's not finished. It's still got to be painted, and a lot of detailing has to happen.
Look
at Peter doing a presentation for the financiers.
Wow. Just a structure. It stood 7 meters tall. It measured about 20 meters square.
We had never done rocks before on the scale that we did on the Helm's Deep miniature.
Right.
We went and bought rolls of industrial grade tinfoil, which we'd hang in massive sheets, and then by very carefully crumpling it, we could begin to artificially build the same detail that you get in huge mountainsides and cliffs.
Back in 1998, we really strategized the battle.
In the world? Are you kidding?
It's
tinfoil?
And then we're
covered in what?
And we're seeing Aragorn running up here, and
oh, this is just fantastic.
I remember Peter spending weeks with all these little toy soldiers stuck down on cardboard bases and shifting them around the actual miniature of Helm's Deep.
Which was actually the reason why we built the miniature at 35th scale, because you could buy plastic toy soldiers, little knights in armor, to use for planning out the battle.
He figured,
oh my goodness,
and we'll be able to put it down and actually get a feel for that. Of course, the few turned out to be, I think, around 40,000. And to do that, they basically bought out, I think, the world's supply of toy soldiers.
And they bought 40,000 toys. I'm done.
In actual fact, there was
that is just going too far.
To get it back to work, you had to see it, you know, just as a
Are you serious? You couldn't do the like pre-vids
right now, but I can't wait. Maybe I can get my hands on a
that
few
is
of them when the show's
outrageous. Preparation. 40,000 toy soldiers.
As happens in every minute of this movie.
I'm outdone.
All the long shot models immediately get shot from about 3 inches away. It's just inevitable. So right away, we started in shooting right over the top of the deeping wall where every single little detail is in sharp focus. So a set that had originally been built in a fairly rough kind of way, never intending to be seen close up, had to be very carefully redetailed. Everything had to be made super sharp because we were shooting from such close range.
I made a little metal stamp, a little handle.
My goodness.
And if you pressed very carefully into the urethane foam, it left an impression of the brick. Now, if you pressed them at slightly different depths as you went along, you would then get the effect of very slightly deeper or raised stones.
Now, we had our small 35th scale miniature of Helm's Deep that we'd done back in 1998, but then we built this huge model, which was a quarter scale, so it was 1/4 the size of the real place. And it was like about 50 feet wide. You could actually crouch down and walk through the main gate. It's just this huge, big miniature. And we'd have to build that on enough of a
big miniature.
To make it work. So
I just cannot. I am in awe.
Full Helm's Deep background. And we would also do force perspective from the quarter scale, bring the deeping wall out, so you could have action happening on the deeping wall with the Helm's Deep Hornburg Keep in the background.
At the very end of shooting on the quarter scale model, of course, the big moment arrives where you get to blow it up. So the physical effects team got in there and basically packed the wall full of charges and blew out all the pieces, and of course covered with many cameras so they could extend the action by cutting to different angles. The thing about explosion of that kind is that it's basically a one-time shot.
Yeah,
exactly. It was not built to be rebuilt and blown up again. So basically you blow it once, and that's what you get.
Yeah, you get all your footage that you can possibly get from all angles, like you said. Oh, perfection. Just wonderful. I just can't get enough. Every location, every set, right? The beginning and end of it.
Like some sort of ungodly Gothic cathedral. Arrogant and slightly uncomfortable. It's partly organic, but it is a structure made of blocks. I did an illustration of the Dark Tower, Barad-dûr, for a Tolkien calendar, and that was one of the illustrations that Peter and Fran had up in their office with many others while they were working on the early scripts. And when it came time to design the tower itself for the film, Peter asked me, "Can you just draw the rest of it, please?" Because I'd never come to terms with actually depicting the summit of the tower. I started from that initial design and then just doodled my way upward to the top.
He said, "Can you draw the rest?"
I was working on. Put another
look
sheet
at that.
next
It's
to
cut
the
off.
top of that.
Oh, then he came.
With
Oh,
no idea
goodness.
how high this tower would actually be.
What?
And, eventually got to the top and ended up designing these two sort of spires or horns that provide the space for the red eye.
Barad-dûr was truly a Big-Ature. I think ultimately it measured 27 feet. It wouldn't even fit in our construction stage. We had to make it in sections because we couldn't completely stand it up because it would hit the roof. A very difficult miniature to build ultimately. If the real
27
Barad-dûr
feet?
stands 2,000
Why would you
tall,
make it so big?
to build an appropriate scale for shooting as close as Peter wanted to,
that
we'd
is
have to build
outrageous.
it around 10 scale, meaning the miniature would have to be over 200 foot tall. Can you imagine? So the only option was to build it
not 200
smaller.
feet. No.
Ultimately, we built it at 166 scale.
We tended to approach the models that, like Barad-dûr, we thought, all right, this would have been built by armies and armies of orcs over many, many, many thousands of years. You can see areas where there's a brick wall and then there's sort of metal plates and panels sort of holding it together, like a rather large jigsaw puzzle where they sort of built a bit and then that lot have died or left and somebody else starts another bit and it looks like it's built by someone else.
We had to fabricate it. Fabrication is like, how do we do
They were really thinking this through, weren't they?
We built some hot
My
rod
goodness.
machines with little hand pieces that we could carve blue foam, and what we were able to do with our tools was create very organic extrusions, and that was just the key to it really, was just to take that technique and then just really play with it and see what we could do.
To move a camera around something that smaller scale is a bit of a trick really, because it's not going to look real.
The only process that would bring this to life is micro detailing, going to incredible efforts to put surface detailing into the skin of the miniature that would hold up in shots that at times are only 2 inches off the surface of the miniature.
Dang, the camera's so close.
Because you really can't light it wrong. Wherever you put light, it gives you wonderful shadows. However, once you come to try to shoot a complex shot like the one that we have in the film, where we spiral almost 270 degrees around the tower, you discover that it's not quite as user-friendly as you might think, because, of course, the light that's beautiful from one side is very flat from the other side. So, in effect, what we had to do as we spiral up the tower, we had to move the key light around. So you're going from one key light to the next, so that in a sense it always chases just a little bit ahead of you, so that it always keeps the tower in backlight.
What in the world? They're just putting so much detail into it that we would never have known. Like, it's just unbelievable.
It
really is.
One of those little icons in the books that you remember so well, and drawing from both Alan Lee and John Howe's illustrations.
Alan Lee had
Look
done
at this
wonderful,
picture. Lord have mercy.
For his illustrated version of The Lord of the Rings.
Alan is very
and because they're
talented.
quite well described by Tolkien, there seemed to be no point in trying to reinvent the wheel. And the design work I did for the Black Gates is obviously very similar to what Alan had actually drawn.
Wow.
The exciting bit about this period of the history of Middle-earth is that the Numenorians have actually left so many structures which are more or less intact. The Black Gates, for example, were originally built to keep evil in Mordor. And now Sauron has turned the tables and has fortified them for just the opposite. The only way to make these incredibly huge and heavy things open would be to have them set on some kind of wheels. And Peter at one point wanted to show that. And I really disagreed. It just seemed to me to make no sense. From a defensive point of view, you wouldn't expose a piece of important machinery like that, but had to give in anyway because he's the boss. But I was really quite pleased to see on the screen later on that the wheels have been covered again by these triangular metallic blades.
It was interesting how staying in touch with the designers influenced what you were writing. There was one occasion, though, where we realized the writing had influenced the design. And we were doing a tour of Weta Workshop, and we got to the Morannon, the Black Gate of Mordor. And I suddenly realized that there were two gates. And then they got the script out, and sure enough, there was a typo. I'd just written gates. I'd done plural. It was quite embarrassing. You know, it is described as one gate. But I think in the end, they decided that the Morannon as an entity, you know, gate, whether it was just a title, could signify, you know, two doors.
Gates. Okay.
Here we have a kind of Hobbit's eye view of the whole gate.
I thought they were saying Black Gates.
Spiky orcish architecture. And this is made by step and repeat. You carve one really perfect spike.
Look at this.
And make many multiples to make all of these individual spikes. That way, you save a lot of manpower. It also means that you can get a repetition that looks convincing. This gate was shot at a really high magnification, which is relatively rare. We normally try to not over-magnify these things because it's extremely hard to keep them in focus and it's extremely hard to detail. But Peter wanted to do some shots where you had the effect that as if you'd basically put the camera on a tripod and put it on the bridge. Now, this whole thing's built out of sheets of iron that have been hammered out by hand by the orcs. Here you can see some of the little lead plates that have been carefully burnished down to represent the iron plating.
Oh, my goodness. Y'all are just doing way too much. Look at this.
To represent the nails. This is a mechanical miniature in the sense
Unbelievable.
Because the gates have to open. It's driven with a motor that lives underneath each gate that's driven and turned by the motion control. Because they're supposed to be huge, 30 times bigger, in fact, than we see them here, it means that everything's got to be ultra, ultra smooth. That's what this stem is sticking out the top here, actually, is we discovered that although we get smooth movement, we couldn't stay. There's just a tiny bit of play in this thing. We had to come in above the frame and run a big bar across and stabilize it, because otherwise it'd be just a slight shimmer, which when the camera's only that
talking so fast, he just knows exactly what he's talking about. My goodness. But he's speaking with so much passion too, you know. You can tell he loves what he's doing. Here we go, Fangorn. Yeah.
What madness drove me there? Fangorn Forest was shot full size on a small built section with just a few trees. But there was no chance of doing any long shots on that set because it was too small. So all the vistas basically had to be done in miniature. Those were trees that are about between 5 and 6 feet tall. Very, very large miniature because you want to have the feeling that it stretched far away in the distance.
They kill me with these miniatures.
Very useful because it was
Big-Atures.
that it was able to hold up to some quite close scrutiny. And you were basically about the size that Treebeard would be when you were walking through this miniature forest.
Oh.
Weta Workshop built the miniature forest, but they hired myself and 3 of my guys from the major forest to go down and build the forest with them, because we sort of knew what it needed to look like.
Right.
But they had a lot of the skills that we weren't that familiar with.
Okay.
And the end result was, when they say it's a miniature forest, it was still
look at
60
this.
feet by 60 feet.
Okay, 60
We've got
feet by 60 feet.
trees approximately. Each one's handmade
60
out of various
feet by
products.
60 feet?
The main trunks are about 4 or 5 gorse branches, about 80-year-old gorse.
It's used in Scotland for growing hedges. In New Zealand, it's run rampant. It's almost taken over half of our country. But wonderfully, it is the most twisted, contorted, evil-looking trunks that you could ever find on a plant.
The whole set was built on a series of wheeled platforms, each one having 2 or 3 trees. So in effect, you could change the angle you were looking simply by pulling these platforms apart, shuffling around, buttoning them back together, covering up the seams, and you'd have a whole new view or a whole new part of the forest.
These 8 trees were built specifically for this one scene, and all the branches sort of, curl over.
Yeah.
Create this sort of cathedral-like space, which is actually Treebeard's house.
Oh.
Treebeard? Fangorn Forest ultimately looked very beautiful, and it feels like a completely realistic forest, and ultimately became a beautiful backdrop for Treebeard and the other Ents.
That was a soundstage. Like, the forest itself they weren't in the forest. They made it.
The last miniatures that we actually built in the primary phase of building miniatures over the first 5 years of the project was Osgiliath.
We basically had 2 sets. We had a 50th scale set that represented about 1/3 of the city. For example, when the Nazgul flies over. That, of course, had to be done in layers because we don't have enough city to actually build the entire thing. And then we had a larger set built at 1/10 scale because a major part of our Osgiliath shooting involved putting backgrounds behind live shots, which were shot on a built set, but it was relatively narrow from front to back. And everything behind that, the back wall of that set, had to be done in the 10th scale miniature.
The dome structure on Osgiliath, that building was done as a series of ribs, and then we just go in and we break bits out. It's a lot easier to build a complete tower and knock holes in it than try and build a tower with holes in it.
Oh,
some of the buildings are on the Gondorian side of the river, which means they're at least a little tidy, and some of the buildings are on the Orcish side of the river, which of course are really ratty. So you're trying to create the illusion that you're actually seeing sort of both parties in this thing and how they have a little different.
I don't know how they don't get attached to their work, to just put so much effort and time and creative vision into doing it.
And finally, Peter said, yes, of course we have to have a rock hitting a building. We said, we don't want to do this digitally. We don't do this as an effect shot. We're just going to smash a building with a rock.
Do you see what I'm saying?
So Paul Van Olmen
smashed the building.
Moritz, our onstage engineer, built a spring-powered catapult. We built a concrete rock, and we fired the rock at the building. And basically, it's what you see is what you get. Many times it's easier to just do something practically than it is to try to do it after the fact with particle systems and animation and stuff. Just think of all that dust and flying debris that you would have had to animate that we got right there on the camera.
Just
first time
right there. They have no problems with just letting it all go. Wow. I would want to keep it all. But you can't.
The full destruction of Isengard's sequence was in limbo for the longest time.
Isengard was breathtaking.
It had to be there, and we knew that there was going to be a huge amount of miniature work done on it. But
until, of course, the Return of the King.
They wanted to face the fact that it had to happen.
It was getting very late. It was literally
didn't want to face the fact that it had to happen.
And we were releasing the film in December. That we realized, my God, we better get this attack on Isengard sorted out.
Yeah.
And we built a little tiny maquette.
That attack was so brilliantly executed.
Something. He'll usually tell you at least something of what's in his head. And that at least got him started thinking about it.
We didn't really approach it with storyboards, which would be traditional, largely because I didn't really have time to sit down and actually storyboard it out in detail.
Of course you didn't.
Right in the middle of the most difficult part of post-production on the two towers.
Eventually it came down to Barry Osborne getting involved and just saying, we need to have somebody to focus on this sequence. And he asked Christian Rivers and myself and Alex Funke to try to create an animatic for it.
And they had all these pieces of different scales of Isengard miniature. And basically we just got a DV camera and some little toy soldiers for orcs and little ant puppets. And we just came up with some shots.
And it was very funny.
What? Really? Because it didn't look like that. It looked like y'all spent a lot of time coming up with that.
And Peter actually cut us into his rough cut. He said, no, that's not quite right, but give me those pieces. I'll cut it together, and then I'll show you what I really want to have.
And it was a good exercise for us to go through because we actually replicated several of those shots for the final film. But it also, I think, helped Pete give us a framework so that we could start breaking down what was going to be required and start planning our shoots.
And then it became a race against time.
I need to watch this again.
Shoot that and get it turned
I
over
keep
to the
saying
visual
that.
effects team so that they could add in all other visual effects.
This was literally thrown at us right at the very end of pickups. We thought we had finished and were getting ready to pack up, and then this thing came up.
And we had the hard word from Barry that, if you don't think you can do it, sort of walk out now. And if you don't do it and you say you can do it, that you won't be walking back in again, sort of thing.
Oh, dang. I heard that.
Building a 9-meter tall miniature dam. And behind that dam, Steve Ingram and his special effects crew had 2 huge dump tanks designed that were using shipping containers and could hold several tons of water, and had explosive bolts on the front door in order to release this water on cue.
It's outrageous that they waited till the last minute to get Isengard together, and it turned out like flawlessly. To me, it was spectacular.
Batch of water hit the back of it.
You would think that they were working on this since the very beginning.
Just went through like a giant sieve.
Look at this.
The wall did not fall down at all. It bowed it, but it didn't fall down at all.
That was pretty embarrassing because Peter Jackson came down and Barry Osborne came down.
Oh, the wall was supposed to fall down?
People from
I like the water coming through like that.
Visual effects all came down to watch it, and it didn't burst.
Well, after
the wall was, okay.
Ed and the art department hollowed out a lot of the bricks on the back side. So from the front, it still looked the same, but it was just very thinly constructed and about ready to fall down. So the second time we did it, we were able to get a very
that's what they were looking for, the busting through. Okay.
The whole thing coming down and the water gushing around things and stuff.
It looked right to me the first time, but I see. Everything is supposed to bust wide open. Oh, that was such a spectacular scene. I can't even tell you. And the trees was out there fighting.
Cut to.
And the ants.
Isengard's destroyed. I'm thankful that Pete was like, no, we really need this sequence. This is really that important.
Yeah. It was. Come on.
What Peter Jackson is really making here is a war movie. It's not a fantasy
surprised
movie
that they waited.
It just happens to have some fantastic characters and it's in some fantastic places. But it's essentially completely real. Everything has to be believable. Everything has to be convincing.
Yeah, I believe the fantasy portion.
You can have the most gorgeous scenery in the world, but if you need to have a tower on the top of a hill, you're not going to be able to build it. You're going to have to create it either a painting or a miniature. And the miniature almost always will be more convincing.
This is so good. Oh, dang, it went off. Yeah, this is another one. I love watching the Big-Atures though, because the models are still models, but they're just huge models. Like they're as big as buildings, which is just insane, really. What is this? Oh, showing the scene of Isengard. Ah, look at them. They're using their hands to destroy the bridge. Oh my goodness. I love their rough drafts. You know what I mean? Is that supposed to be the water? I cannot. I don't know how much of this I'll be able to show on screen for YouTube, but it's so funny to see the rough draft in this, you know, in this form. Because it's different from like the pre-vids and the storyboards. It's like they're using like this plastic wrap as the water, and they had the styrofoam blocks and they were using their hands to move it, and just, it's so funny. And they got the little toy, they had the little toy soldiers up, and good for them. They did whatever it took, you know. They started with these very basic, rough ideas and just expanded on them. Wow. That was good. All right, here's another one. Break the dam, and then all chaos ensued after that, and it was so good. It's kind of unbelievable that they waited till the last minute to do this, right? Like they literally didn't have anything in mind. They had to create a team on the spot to like come up with something, and this is what they came up with the pressure on. Just fantastic. It tickled me so much just to see the look, there it is right there, the tree that went and put its I was just about to talk about that, the tree that was on fire, the hair was on fire and ran out into the water to put it out. That was so funny to me. In the midst of all of the war, you know, and the chaos and all of that, of course these trees are flammable, so they're going to have to you know, just jump in the water to get the fire off of them. I love that they included that. It's so genius. I loved how they were all pulling together out there. Oh, we're on Weta Digital. I'm just gonna let it play through. Okay, you guys, that is the end of the video, Big-Atures. I feel like that video was very short compared to the one that we saw for Fellowship of the Ring. I could have watched so much more. I'm telling you, I just can't get enough of it. You know, you have, they're actually called miniatures, and they're like these huge sets that are as big as entire buildings. You know, and I just can't get enough of learning more about them. The fact that at one point, this is how detailed they are. They actually went to go buy, what was it, like 40,000 toy soldiers in order to replicate the army for Helm's Deep. Come on. Were you guys astonished by that? Because that just really blew me away. Like, really, I feel like they really do go above and beyond, because did they really need to do that in order to see? Because I'm thinking that storyboards would have sufficed, or pre-vids, but they literally went and bought up all of the toy soldiers in order to simulate the army. I just love it. I do. The fact that they just go so far, and with the details of the each of the sets, like they did this with every single set. You know what I mean? Like, they didn't cut corners with anything. So I can see why the budget was as much as it was, because they wanted to make sure that this movie was going to still be talked about 20 years later, which it is. I also really enjoyed the set about the forest. For some reason, it just feels like such an enchanted feeling for me whenever I see their replication of the forest inside of these sounds, these stages, like these buildings, just like they did for the enchanted forest for the elves. I love how much time and vision that they put into these sets, because let me tell you, that forest looked like it was an actual forest, and it was huge. Yeah, that's what really gets me the most about these sets, is that they are supposed to be miniatures, but they're actually, just so huge. Some of these sets are like put together like a jigsaw puzzle. So they're like these huge, like 3D jigsaw puzzles that they pieced together just one day at a time. I just don't understand how they had time to actually pull off, you know, everything that they did because they were so thorough, you know. But they did it. All right, you guys, that's going to be my wrap up for this week. And I will see you guys next week with Weta Digital. All right, thank you again for joining me. Until next time, let's flow.